Record on this. On June 16, 2021, Governor Baker signed into law an act extending certain COVID measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act now includes an extension on April 1st, 2022, the remote meeting provision of his March 12, 2020 executive order suspending certain provisions for the open meeting law. And that's what I have for the statement.
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
I'll start with opening meeting roll call. Robert?
Yeah.
Nate?
Yeah, I'm here.
George?
Yeah.
And I, Stephanie, am here. Absent is Brian, who is on extended leave, and Sarah, who has informed us that she unfortunately, due to having birthed both a business and an actual tiny human this year, that she is not able to continue serving on the committee, which I'm sad to hear. And I think we all share in thanking her for her service to the committee and the town. And as I mentioned, earlier, that I think it's just another, sign that we need to make sure that we are meeting folks of all ages and life situations where they're at in terms of their ability to engage in town decision-making process. So let's get into the minutes. We have minutes from January 13th, 2021. I'll entertain a motion. First, any discussion? Any changes to that? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to approve.
I'll move that we approve both of them simultaneously. And it was need to discuss either one.
I'll second it.
Works for me. All in favor? Sorry,
Aye.
I guess I have to roll call everyone. Robert?
Well, I was absent for one, but this has been weird, but in order for majority of quorums to work, I have voted in the past to support a minute, even though I wasn't at the meeting. How do you feel about that? I don't know, it's just, we've had.
It's personal choice.
Yeah, I know, I
personal
don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I'll say, I was at, like I said, I wasn't at one of them, but I'm in favor of the motion. I support the motion.
Okay. Nate,
Well,
Aye. Aye.
George?
There's a conflict there. If Robert is listed as president of both.
Oh, I thought he wasn't at, I thought one of them I wasn't at. Are you sure?
Yeah.
It says you're at both.
Well, maybe I was. It is there a while ago, so my memory's not that great on those, but all right, then either way, just forget about the absent part. I must have been there. And I'm in favor of the motion.
Okay, and for the record, I am an I as well. Okay, budget transfers. Am I turning that over to Bill or Ed?
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Budget transfers? Who am I turning it over to, you or Ed?
That would be Ed. If I may, Madam Chair, Betty Moylan is waiting. That is Jack, I believe, right?
I'm sorry, what's the name?
Betty Moylan. So I think that's probably Jack. The hand is raised, so I should.
Yeah.
Panelist. Okay, great.
I believe
There we go.
that's Jack's
All right.
wife's name.
So budget transfers, I will move Ed Centio is here if you have any questions.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, before you jump in, Ed, I just want to confirm, Jack, is that you? And can you hear us and see us all right?
You're muted, Jack.
And when we say Jack, we mean Betty on the screen.
I'm here, Seth.
Oh, good. Thank you. We're so glad to have you.
I got into my other iPad.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you. Ed, nice to see you.
Nice to see
Please
you all.
take it away.
We have three articles or three transfers. I'll just take them in date order, one from October. And what we're doing with these articles are also looking to clean up very old articles and use them for relevant current purposes. So you'll see a number of articles. The first one is related to the airport consulting services. I'm not sure if you attended the meeting where the airport consultant gave information about the airport changes that they want to implement. And this is a consultant that's experienced in that area, and we're paying him to look out for the interests of the town of Yarmouth.
Terrific. Does anyone have any questions with regards to this first budget transfer?
Can we screen share those? I don't have it in front of me, so
Do I have
I mean, I
one?
go dig it up, but it,
Electronic,
if you can't do it, I'll go
I
find
think
it.
they were sent out at a former
probably.
email.
Mary Alice, does she? copy them?
Yeah. Are you looking for copies? I thought that went out in the email.
We'll take a look.
Let me,
Normally, when we do go over documents, they're also put up on the screen so that people watching at home, as well as members of the committee, we can kind of look over it and walk through it.
Right.
If you give me a second, I might be able to.
no, I'll do it. I've got it right here and screen share. Yeah, budget transfer. There we
Thanks, Bill.
go. You're welcome.
So this is a different one, where right now we're discussing the one relative to the airport
Yeah, let me
consultant.
go to that one for you. Just gonna, why the mouse, this is not bigger.
There we go. Nope, you just had it. Go down one. There you go.
That's it.
Okay,
Can you maybe make that just a tad bigger by zooming in? Thank you.
all set?
I think so. So did anyone have any questions for Ed about this particular transfer? Okay. And,
I'm sorry, I do.
oh, go ahead, Robert.
Ed, it looks like we're taking a lot of departments that are not associated with airport consulting services and sliding funds over.
That's
Um,
correct. So we're supposed to either get approval from the Board of Selectmen, or we close out articles related to them being over 2 years. So
Yep.
this is a way to close them out and use them for a useful purpose during this particular year. You'll see many transfers that go from, say, a DPW department to another department. So there's no rule that says you can't transfer them amongst budgets.
Right, and I understand that, but this is typically, I don't like doing it this way. I prefer to see all funds go back to the general funds and then have people pull them out of some type of request. You know, how do all these different department heads, you know, and I know it's leftover money, but they wouldn't want to repurpose it into something that they have?
That's not their call.
I get it's not their call, but again, I feel funny when we do this. I mean, it's all right. I get it. I like to see all articles and stuff, again, go back to the general fund, and then everybody can appeal equally instead of this nature of sliding things from departments that are, you know, not related.
So Bob Lawton met with each one of their departments and only brought to the Board of Selectmen the ones that they felt they needed to keep on going.
Okay,
So there's no mass general law, there's no town precedence that says you can't transfer from one department if they've already exhausted the need for these funds to work on another project. And this is, you know, again, airports related to the overall, you know, well-being of the town.
okay, thanks.
Ed,
Yes, sir.
what do we actually expect from this consultant? We've been dealing, in Hyannis Park, we've been dealing with the airport for 11 years that I'm aware of, and we get zero response from them.
Yeah, I think what we're hoping is that utilizing somebody that has a lot of experience can talk to the airport group and maybe offer additional or alternative plans that will be less impactful on our citizens in Hyannis Park or the west side of Yarmouth. So this is somebody that it's, decades of experience with these types of projects and may be able to provide a better set of responses to the airport than perhaps just staff would. We have nobody on board that purports to be an airport consultant or that can, speak to those, detailed issues. And this might be a way to position ourselves to get better responses from the airport in the town of Barnstable.
Ed, if I may, Jack, my understanding is the context of the hire at this particular time is because Barnstable Municipal Airport is looking at an expansion that would potentially involve different flight paths, which would impact more people in Yarmouth than it already does. So that's kind of the context for making sure that as little of a seat at the table that we have, that we are armed with enough information. I don't know if Bill or Ed, you would agree with that assessment, but that's my understanding of what the
Very well
context is.
said.
Yeah, they have a runway expansion that they're looking at, and they're doing a master plan in accordance with their FAA requirements. And as Ed indicated, this gentleman has very specific skills as it relates to FAA regulations. So if this were a language, he speaks it quite well. So he's able to understand where they can use alternatives based on FAA regulations.
We'll see.
So Jack, I think you're right. We haven't been heard in the past, and this is an opportunity to approach it differently and try to get our voices heard.
Does that mean every plane at 6 o'clock in the morning won't be going over my house?
That's part of the hope.
I would certainly
see.
hope so. All right, any other
Okay.
questions for Ed about this particular transfer? Hearing none, would you, Bill, would you recommend that we vote on all of these at the same time or one at a time?
Either way works. I mean, if you don't have any problems with this, then I would go through them all and then vote the budget transfers as submitted, or do you require both individual votes or no?
And there's been the authorization for the chairperson to sign the documents. We
Great.
have signatures, as you may see, from the Board of Selectmen and the town administration for all of them.
Okay, we'll go through all of them and then barring someone having an objection to one particular one, we'll vote on them as a package. Next, please, which,
Which one do you want to
Text
do
title
next?
attorney, the one with the pink
One with the pink.
color coded.
Thank you for color coding these.
Yeah.
There we go.
Not on purpose, but it worked out that way. As you all might recall, because of COVID, we had a more relaxed collection process. We delayed any interest and penalty until June 30th of 2020. In addition to that, we did not put properties in tax title. We didn't want to shake people up. A lot of people think that tax title means that you are actually going to foreclose on their property and they're going to be homeless. And sometimes it takes a while to explain that this allows us to perfect the lien that we have on these properties. So we did not do 19 and we did not do 20. This year we did 19 and 20, and we want to also do 21. Again, it doesn't foreclose on the property. We have to do it within 3 years. We're ahead of the game, and the reason why we want to be ahead of the game is because as of June 30th, we want to have our books in tremendous shape. And and fiscally, we're in very good shape. And we should show that at the end of June 30th, as we did this past June 30th. The audit should be out soon for us. And the goal is obviously to have the lowest interest rate possible for the myriad of borrowing we're probably going to do across the organization to meet the wastewater needs, possibly the seawalls and revetments, and other asks that people have as it relates to capital. So we want to drive down our interest rates by hopefully going for a AAA, which we've been denied through COVID, even though our financials were in great shape. So we just want to polish our books by just going and taking care of these last few items we have. We've been written up on Cape Cod Times for our collection policy, both humane and effective, having the lowest tax title accumulations of any town on the Cape. So we want to continue to make sure that our taxpayers are paying their taxes, aren't subsidizing those that are not. And that's just a continuation of our policy where we had a pause in previous years.
Thanks, Ed. Questions for Ed on this particular item?
Yeah, I have one. I understand the receivable part, but it's just the issue compounded by the decrease in the second account. I assume that's the account we're transferring into. Is that because we underfunded that account? We just, in budget, didn't put enough in it?
Yeah, so let me give you a couple of reasons. During COVID, we actually decreased, or everybody had to contribute to a decrease in their budget. So
Okay,
we did
that's
is-
all I want. That's fine.
Yeah.
It's written so vaguely, it's compounded by, and I'm saying, how does this compound unless that was the account you're expecting to transfer into it because you can't pay the attorney's fee?
we reduced our general fund budget
Oh, okay.
as police
That
did for their
explains it.
overtime budget.
Great,
Yeah.
that explains it. Yeah, I understand why your ARs are going to be better with a secured interest behind them as opposed to no secured interest. I don't know that makes them any more collectible, but yeah, okay.
What happens when it's in the registry of deeds, and this is part of the lien process, if somebody sells the property,
No, I understand. I understand. I lent money
Okay.
for 20 years. I understand.
yeah,
It's nice
and
to
we
be
sell
first in
receivables,
line, not last.
and we sell receivables as well, which allow us
Right,
to
right. right.
cover all the receivables.
Okay.
Ed, I have a question for you. You do reference this S&P rating call. Is that something that we should be at all concerned about, or is that going to be more like you can explain what happened, they understand the context of the pandemic, and it's kind of not a big deal, but just something we still want to be in process cleaning up?
So our rating call may be as early as this spring. So once we go through the tax settle process in our lien auctions, we'll give them the current look at our financials, and then it will be easily explained that we went through a process of, being very lenient from a collection standpoint. We're still, this doesn't accelerate the collections, it just, allows us to perfect the lien and sell our tax sales. So yes, we can explain. And particularly if we have the results in hand, which we will, with the passage of this article.
Are we gonna lose our gold star for being nice as a result?
I don't know.
Full day.
Again, we'll show them the Cape Cod Times article because we actually hook up our residents. We don't do this for anybody that's a resident. We only do it for vacant land, commercial properties, and second property owners. We also give people, we work with Hands of Hope to give people debt counseling. That was part of the whole tax lien process that we implemented. We give them a resource list of all of the things such as electrical, help with electricity, help with food, help with fuel assistance. So we reach out to anybody that's behind in their taxes with all of those types of things so that we are trying to support them in their need, and we don't foreclose, we sell receivables. And they like to they like to keep the interest rate and not foreclose either.
Ed, did you say that you don't, that this, what this transfer is for would not be relative to homeowners, residents in town? Did I hear that correctly?
No, we put everybody in tax title. It's just that
Okay,
what we
okay,
don't do is foreclose on those folks that are living in their own homes, single family home in the
Got
town
it.
of Yarmouth, and we don't sell their tax liens.
got it. So I just want to mention another resource that you can add to your list. The Homeowner Assistance Fund is in a soft launch right now. It's launching, I think pretty much January 1st. So anyone who is, I think 100% of area median income or below, and is behind on their mortgage or their taxes, 3 months at least, can apply via the state to get some financial assistance, and there's no cap on it. So it's a tremendous resource that comes out of some of the dollars that Congress passed. Just something for you all to be aware of. Any other questions for Ed about this particular transfer?
Nope.
I just have one point of curiosity, Ed. If you don't know it off the top of your head, it's totally fine. Just looking for a quick answer. Ballpark. How many, if we're at 120 properties right now that are behind, how many in 19 and 20 were behind that have kind of caught up? Like, were people, I guess the general kind of sense I'm looking for is, were there people that were significantly behind that have been able to make progress, or is it, are we still kind of seeing the same kind of treading of water from the same folks?
There are repeats, and they're mostly residents in the town of Yarmouth. There aren't a lot of repeats from a commercial. Once they get the message. So, what one person told me, I pay my taxes in my home town. I just don't pay my taxes in Yarmouth. I'm really a good taxpayer. And I said, well, that really doesn't help me. I'm working for the town of Yarmouth, the taxpayers of the town of Yarmouth. So, why don't you not pay the taxes where you live and occasionally pay our taxes? But I think they get the message now.
Good enough.
After
All right.
6 or 7 years.
Thank you. What's the next item?
The next item, read this time?
Read this time?
Yeah.
Thank you for the, there we go. Is that it?
Yes, so the health department, like many of our departments, are having difficulty hiring staff members, so they still haven't been able to hire an assistant health director. So what they're looking to do, and we were able to pay for this assistance using CARES Act funds in the past, but that stopped on October the 29th. So this is a transfer from wages where the assistant town or assistant health director would have been paid to professional and technical, so we can pay a contractor to go out and start inspecting our Title V septic systems and keep the building and the other items, the repairs going for our taxpayers. So it's just a transfer from one account within the health department to another. And Bob, to your point, when, say, police or fire or anybody else needs help with their budget, yeah, we try to do that. If it was finance in the general fund and we had extra money, we would try to do that. But in this particular case, we're actually doing what you had proposed that we do. Health department is taking care of the issue with their funds.
Questions for Ed? Okay. I just have a quick question for Bill on this, and it may be something that you don't know because you're still getting acclimated to the town, but I feel like I'm hearing this line of, we're having a hard time filling a position. And I know that we've discussed that low wages is part of the problem, but and you don't even need to answer this now, but just maybe something that would be curious or good for the committee to hear is how often this is starting to happen, if it's starting to become more of a trend or less of a trend. And, obviously like that, I think fits into the later agenda items of, kind of budget recommendations from departments.
Well, you're always going to have, in terms of the upper end positions, let's say, director positions and assistant director positions that are going to need housing, and housing is kind of sparse and expensive down here. So people are going to migrate to places where it is, if it's on the Cape, less expensive. And then there's the upward mobility, in the sense that people are going to take jobs when they see that their opportunity to go up in the job. That's another case. Lower end positions, it's usually, can they matriculate up? So the Cape is a difficult place because of housing costs and, other factors, that it is not as much the wage as it is how much you have to spend on groceries, gas, and housing, and how much you get back after you net all that out. So if I'm living on the North Shore and shopping in, New Hampshire, I don't have as many of those challenges as some of the people might have down here. So it is difficult in terms of to get labor, and that's why we have, even in the hotels and restaurants, that J1 and other people, that are transient employees, that base is no longer available. People don't take those jobs anymore.
Yeah, I kind of already knew what the answer was going to be, but
Yeah.
I'm asking it from the perspective that I think that, I know that, members of this committee, probably the Board of Selectmen know that, but I don't know how many members of the public know that, and town meeting voters know that. So I think we can talk about it later, but my thought is that it would be good for us to start to track that, and to start to, publicize that, either in, these department head, reports, or in our report to on the warrant of, what some of the challenges are in town, so that we start to get a little bit more awareness amongst the general public, because it's obviously going to be critical to our sustainability as a region.
Bill touched on it, just a real quick note, and I won't take a lot of time. Bill touched on it briefly. I'm going to amplify it a bit in specific situation as it relates to the finance department. The state put out a study that said in 5 years, and this study was 3 years ago, that 25% of the folks that work in the accounting office will retire. And then you have to fill those positions. So that goes to the competition aspect of trying to get staff, and people bidding up the price of staff. And the same study indicated that in 5 years, again, that study was 3 years ago, 35% of those folks that are in the treasury collection roles will be retired. So we just had two retirements from the collector treasurers area. And, we continue to have more retirements. So, just bringing on people, and then that's happening throughout the Cape and throughout the state. So there's some bidding up of those wages, and our wages aren't keeping pace.
Yeah.
And the pandemic doesn't help, that most of the people I know, they're either retiring or they're not moving for fear that when they go to the next job, there's going to be layoffs at the place they're going to. So not a lot of people are moving around in positions in the public sector because of that. They're settling and waiting for it to, subside, because some people, they'll go from one job to the next, and the next job says we're not meeting revenue, last in, first out type of thing.
And we're doing things like setting up internship programs. We hired 5 people. The one person, unfortunately not in the town of Yarmouth, is now the director of assessing in Orleans after spending 3 years in the town of Yarmouth. And he was, in his 30s, and they hired him as a director because they can't find people. And within the shop, that was the only loss we had. And we had somebody as an intern, was going to college, worked here as an intern. She's now our town accountant. So we're trying to build from within, and those people are showing some great loyalty, but they can walk anytime they want and make more money than they're getting paid here.
Yeah, noted. I think I'll close it out just by saying, I think this is another reason why we need to be looking at what are the economies of scale that we can do in terms of providing services for other towns, and what can we do with other towns where they are providing services for us as it becomes more difficult in the employment market as well as, housing situation. All right.
I tried to
Any
get
other?
I tried to get Barnstable County
Can I
to
make
look
one
at the
comment?
ERCOG model.
Sure, George.
We do have this structural problem as you've described it. And it would seem the obvious solution is
Please start now.
we'd have to pay more. So I guess relative to whoever our peers are we paying higher than the average, lower than the average, or right at the average?
Yeah,
Well,
and our benefits,
therein lies the problem.
Yeah.
benefits are the lowest
Yeah.
allowable by law.
Well, then I would attribute it to that more than anything else. But I think this is something we certainly have to look at, especially given what Ed just told us about the prospects for retirement in the near term.
These are Cape-wide problems, though. I hear them in every town.
But-
Though I will say it's exacerbated by us not paying competitive wages.
Exactly.
We tried to work through the county to look at what Linda Dunleavy and Western Mass is doing, where they're actually supplying accounting services to multiple different communities. Tried to work with the county to replicate that. But, you see the financial mess that they're in continually. So they might not be the organization. Some people have approached us to combine assessing departments with multiple different towns. So we've talked about regionalization and sharing resources. And we have probably the best processing model of anybody on the Cape in terms of paperless processing. The auditing that we do electronically. So we're looking to actually pair with the town of Barnstable and Harwich on a way to process accounts payable more hands-off by using OCR technology. So we're trying to push the envelope based on what I saw in the private sector. So we're trying to do a lot of that work just to mitigate it. And we had 24 people in the finance department. We're down to 19, and we're just trying to do it through automation and just creativity and just hard work. But
Yeah.
we're starting to kind of explode at the seams a little bit with the workload.
Well, I appreciate it, and I think we can talk more about it at a future meeting, but I want to keep us on track. So do we have any other budget transfers at this point?
You got them all?
That's it. Just
All right.
Okay.
I
I will,
move the transfers be approved.
thank you, Jack. Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay, Robert,
Aye.
Nate. Nate,
Nate's muted.
we'll come back to Nate. Jack,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
I am a yes as well. Nate, just circling back to you, do you vote in favor of the transfers?
Yes, sorry, I lost you.
No worries. All right, thank you.
I'll start
Alright.
talking to you on my cell phone.
Can I just raise a question here? I heard 3 budget transfers that we discussed. When we talked about the last one, do we mention that we have 2 months, or it looks like 2 months? There are 2 $4,000 transfers. One for on 11/29, signature by Mark Forrest, and another 11/15 signature.
That
by
was a
Mark
repeat.
Forrest.
That was repeated. It's the same transfer.
So it's the same transfer, or the transfer done a second time because we had another month to pay?
It's the same transfer.
All right. So we only had 3 transfers.
That's correct.
Okay.
But you were given one, there was one repeat.
Okay.
And we might have to come back to you again if they can't hire the assistant. but
Lose it
that
again?
was the one.
I appreciate your eye to detail on that, George. Thank you. All right, let's move on to capital budget questions for departments. Bill, do you want to? lead this discussion?
Actually, what we wanted to do is, as you go through the budget process, we're going to send you the profile sheets that were given to the capital improvements or capital budget committee. And they provide you with the narrative, and then we'll also we have sent you the capital improvements program. And then as you go through the sequence in the budget process, the best thing to do is you would call out as members, which issues in the capital program do you want to know more about, so we can pre-vet those questions for departments. So when they appear before you, they would be able to say, okay, they want to know about this particular truck or this improvement, and they should be prepared to answer questions on that. So within that context, we will send you the capital budget profile submittals. They are PDFs. And then as you go through the budget process, you would ask the department directly questions that you might have. So the week before a particular submittal, capital improvements members would basically say, I want to know about this submittal by this department and this, and then we would send those questions to the department, and they would then show up prepared to talk about the capital at the same time they talk about their budget.
Let me see if I'm following this. You're saying, for example, we meet on January 5th, I think is the first meeting.
Yep.
And we would have sheets at that point of what the departments are that are kind of coming up next, and we would prepare those questions at that time. And you would send
No,
them ahead of
I'm
time?
going to send you the profile sheets by department, probably as early as next week. And then when that department comes up, you would go through the sheets for that department and say, I want to know about the recreation picnic tables, January 5th, they're up. So at the week before, people might send the emails and say, could you tell me more about this? And I would pass it on to the department, so they'd be prepared. That way we can shorten up the dialogue on CIP items by virtue of having them be prepared to talk about the CIP items that they have. You may not want to talk about the tractor or a particular truck or the building inspector vehicles. But if you do, you'll have the opportunity the week before the discussion on the budget to send me questions that I could then forward to them.
So you're
Because
suggesting the questions should go directly to you?
I mean, yeah, we could do that. It's just that I wouldn't want, so the capital budget committee has a good process in the sense that, and you may want to consider this, they have liaisons, and Robert can speak to this. He was a liaison for a few of the departments where they meet with the department, they tour the facility, they look at the equipment. And then when the department is there, you have a hands-on person to say, yeah, I saw this, or I spoke to them about that. So you could.
So I understand the big picture, excuse me, I'm sorry. I understand what you're trying to achieve, and I think it makes a ton of sense. I'm trying to understand the sequence of it and if that's going to work in a way that's logistically feasible for this committee. That's where my questions are coming from. So I think the whole concept generally will keep us on track. But what I'm asking is, you'd laid out in a budget memo, which I know is a separate topic, that there would be an opportunity for questions, and then there would be a point later on where we'd get answers in a different meeting. So is it a similar structure?
that schedule, which we'll get to, you'll still each of the scheduled times that are there, and I'll quickly bring that up because it does relate to this in the sense that so I've got the document up on the screen that is the memo that I sent out, and what this represents is a combination of emails, memos, what the town administrator sent out in terms of to departments. So the first table is all the documents that are attached that are relative to the budget message and its sequence. And then, so if you look at January 5th, the community services will be there, recreation, golf, senior center, and natural resources. I was able to glean from emails that Pat Armstrong sent, the sequence and the grouping. So you would then talk to those departments about their budgets. So what we might do is I would send out an email to everybody and say, here are these departments coming up in the next week. Do you have any questions regarding capital or any questions regarding their budgets? Then I would send it to them so they show up prepared that there's a particular issue that somebody wants to discuss. It shortens up the meeting, and it goes back to that liaison issue in the sense that I don't know if Robert would tell you, I know when the liaisons would come in, they would say, yeah, I saw that, or I talked to this person, or I asked them the question. You don't have to go that far, but I think what we want to do is reach out to the departments regarding their capital and their budget, and the week before say, yeah, I reviewed your budget, and these are some of the questions I have. So when you show up, be prepared to answer them. The rest of this table basically has, how you would do it, have an agenda, which is a week prior, a department would give you any supplemental materials. And then there's a presentation format that apparently has been used in prior years. You ask questions of the department after the presentation. You develop a punch list of items that you would ask them to go back and get you the information on. And then at the end, you would, of each department, you would recap. The difficulty in creating a report like a capital budget report and or a finance committee report, it's better that in the heat of the moment, as it were, after you finish with the department, to say, here are my concerns and here's my support or whatever, so we can create the sections of the report as you move along. So the agenda does that. But I think the best thing to do is if you have questions as you get the budgets, as you have the capital, ask them. So I would send them an email and they would then come into the meeting with, I understand you want to know why I'm adding this position or why I'm buying this piece of equipment. And in that regard, here's my response. Having
so-
asked them at the meeting means they're probably coming back to give you the answer.
Yeah, so
So-
logistically, what I'm trying to get a handle on is, would we be asking them questions ahead of time on capital and then be asking them in the heat of the moment about budget, or are you recommending we package them, get them both out ahead of time so they can
I
respond?
think whatever you see in the material that is the capital profile sheets and then the budget documents. Now, the budget documents are apparently due on the 31st. So on the December 31st, you're going to receive community services as just one budget, but then on January 5th, you'll receive your books. So you'll see the budget submittals for the cases that are in front of you on the 5th, and then you'll get your books and you'll have all that before each meeting. So between 1 week and the next, some people are sending me emails on Monday or Tuesday and saying, can you ask the department to do this? And I'm batching those emails and then sending them to the department and say, look out for these issues. And if it includes capital also, then you can do that. The only issue is what it does for you is that as you're reading it, you're writing down your questions. And if you're getting them to me, I'm sending them to departments and they're showing up prepared instead of saying, let me get back to you, or going through a very long answer on how to get the answer. So given you have a very truncated process, you're starting on the 5th and ending to meet the deadline on the 22nd, 16th. We probably want to have those sort of intermediate. So if I was review community services, you would get the material on the 31st, and a few days later, you might send me emails and I would send it to those people and say, be aware that they're concerned about these issues.
Great.
And then
Okay.
the same thing with the 12th with planning. Or at the end of the meeting, you can tell me for the next meeting, it's going to be difficult for the first one, but the second one, you can tell me, hey, I have these questions on the one that's upcoming. Because
Okay,
you'll
you've
have the
answered my
books.
question. Thank you.
Yep.
Other members of the committee, general thoughts on this as it relates to the capital budget? Okay. So I'd say that makes a lot of sense. It would be helpful for me as chair to be copied on those, assuming it doesn't violate any kind of open meeting law.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is, as you send them, I'll group them, put them into an email, one singular email, send them to the department. And it's not necessarily that they're questions from individual members. There'll be here are questions from the finance committee, and it's sort of in bullet form. Please be prepared to explain in detail the additional staff position and how it helps you, deliver services or whatever. Those might be the type of questions you would ask, or explain to me why you need this mower, and that way they're going to come into the meeting on Wednesday, having Monday and Tuesday, hopefully, if you send them on Friday or even on Monday, that they know you're going to ask these questions. It's not like you have to prepare them, but if you see something that really concerns you or is not as clear, we can pass them along. We'll coordinate that for you.
Right. I'm just saying as chair, I would want to be weaved into that process.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts on the capital budget item for the agenda today? Okay, seeing none. Let's get back into that document you sent out, future meetings budget process.
Sure. So as I said earlier, what this is looking back at the material I sent you that was sent from the town administrator, which was essentially the budget guidance to the departments. What I did is I put it in a sort of a document sequence: budget schedule, charter requirements, policy, guidelines, presentation template. So this is a compendium of emails from Pat Armstrong, the budget materials that came from the town administrator and the finance department, with the exception, obviously, of some of the materials that's related to here's how you enter your payroll in this software module. You don't need to be burdened with that. So those documents give you an idea of the deliverables that are delivered to the process. So what we would do is then transfer those deliverables to you to create that consistency, what the administration sees, what the Board of Selectmen sees, the Finance Committee sees. So in the process, there was a budget presentation template, and I talked to Jeff Colby, and he said it's a pretty good way to, sort of, apples to apples in terms of across departments. And it's not that I've been through budget processes and the fire department comes in with a 30-slide presentation, and there's, lights flashing on ambulances in the presentation, and then another department comes in with 2 slides. So this is a great way to basically say, here's the questions we're asking, and those are in these documents: budget presentation, budget guidelines, and here's the format. Now, taking that and moving it forward, in the schedule that's indicated by the town manager, February 22nd is the date in which the Finance Committee brings back their recommendations. So to be able to do that and to have all the departments in front of you, this seems to work, the schedule. So the budget is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, is going to be delivered by the 31st. We may not have the books ready by then. So what we're going to do is send you in that first top item, the community services budgets, which are pretty straightforward compared to the others. And then so on the 5th, the town administrator will appear and provide this sort of, here's the review we did, here's what we're finding, the budget message. Your budget books will be given to you, but you will have already at least a community services section. And then those departments will come in and present to you. The week before, I'll probably have sent out an email and saying, given the materials that we sent, please send us back, let's say by Monday, any questions you might have, and I will forward them to the department. What we've done with this schedule is it used to be police and fire right up front. I think what we want to do is we want to start with some of these smaller departments and then package what I typically call the big three in the middle of the process, which is fire, police, and DPW. So you go through the process with, on the 5th, the town administrator, budget books, and community services. Then in the 12th, you will have the budget books, so you'll have the rest of the budgets, community development, and all those particular divisions and inspectional services. And there's a good relationship between inspectional services and community development, so having both in the room is a sort of a positive thing. And then fire and police on the 19th, public works. Jeff has enough divisions that could fill up the entire evening. And then you're wrapping up with IT, administration, finance, collections. About the time we're running out of money, Ed, we'll get your department.
Thank you.
So, and then what I've done is given you a callback sort of thing here. It wasn't in some of the prior ones, but you may find that we need to know more, and you tell the department, well, why don't you get it to us, and then we're going to pick it up on the 9th, or you call people back and say, if you could get us more information, we'll bring you back on the 9th. So that's sort of your contingency day. If you're running over, if you can't see everybody, or if you want more information where finance and the department needs to do a little bit more work, we're not going to sit there in a meeting and try to run the numbers. We're going to say, well, why don't we bring it back on the 9th and answer that question? On the 16th, you're developing recommendations report, and I'll show the agenda approach. What we're trying to do is at the end of each group, you're saying, what would we want to consider to inclusion in the report regarding this group? So that by the time we get there, there's enough notes and sort of bullet points to then write the report, not in a fashion of all of it at once, trying to take in all the meetings, but incrementally, we're sort of making our documentation. So
And
the
when you
16th
say-
you develop, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Sorry.
When you say the report, are you talking about the report to the Board of Selectmen, or are you
Yes.
talking about the report that goes on the warrant?
Well, that's a good point. And when I get to the agenda, let me just finish these two. You
Sure.
develop the report, you complete it and transmit it on the 22nd. So what we're doing is in the report approach down below, you might want to consider that your introduction, that what will appear in the warrant is your introduction to your report. So you've written what is going to appear in the warrant, because ostensibly it is, in somewhat of an overview of your budget message. So your introduction will probably be the text, one page that is going to be what's going in the warrant. So you're not creating additional effort. You're right. What you're writing is what's going to go inside the warrant. Then the process. So I would basically write that section for you. So what your schedule was like, what your process you use, some of the things that are in this memo, sort of the methodology. Then I think departments, you might write one page on each, with some multi-division things on what your comments are, the departments, and your recommendations for their budgets. And then by the time you're at the end of the process, all you really have to do is do the conclusions, the wrap up, and you're not really going back. So with the end of each meeting, we're trying to write the sections for each of the department groupings. So I think to answer your question, what goes in the warrant book might be the introduction in this report. So you're not having to write something additional. And also you're making sure that there's consistency in the message, that if it comes from the report, it's going to be going right to the warrant. So there's good consistency there. Something might occur between the time you write that and town meeting that sort of alters that message. So, we can choose to edit it before we go to warrant. So,
The school's budget.
oh yes, the school's budget. Yes,
Exactly.
that's a page in itself. Yeah, I haven't there's a note, a small notation that says, well, the school budget process will be incorporated as necessary with the above when information becomes available. So I'm not quite
TBD.
sure. I didn't see some of that in the messaging. I didn't see it in the emails from Pat. So right now, this is our schedule. I will figure out when the school budget fits within that. And Ed, I don't know if you could speak to that on how that normally happens, other than dumped on your desk at the end of the process kind of thing, or.
Yeah, the way the school, I think, as you know, the way the school does it is they put their wish list into a budget. Then they reduce the increase in the budget that they give to us, indicating that those are cuts. They'll present it to us pretty much at the very end of our process. And as many, or some of you know, then we often have to go back and relook at some of our budgets. This may not be the year that that's needed. They should have a lot of excess and deficiency, or what we call free cash, maybe to deal with some, major things that they want to add. But, they usually give us their budget after we've completed our whole budget process. And then we've got to kind of react to what they've given us and do what's appropriate at that point in time. Is it an override if they're over Proposition 2.5, which they normally will be? So it's kind of scrambling at the end to try to fit whatever's appropriate into our overall budget.
And to Ed's point, in terms of coming at the end, coming at the end of the process, you can look at February 9th when I was structuring this and then writing the sentence at the bottom of the table. You might look at February 9th's callbacks capital, where the school budget comes in. You still do some of that sort of callback, but if we find out that they're ready, that's where we put them in, is on the 9th. So they're within the schedule.
One of the things that might be helpful is just to try to schedule them immediately.
Right.
And, perhaps they'll give us an idea of what direction they're heading in. They have to go through their hearings with the school committee. And perhaps your perspectives could be known if you do get them in early, even before they have finalized their budget. But that's up to what you would like to do as a board or a committee.
And to that point, why don't I, if the chair wants to consider, could write a letter from the chair, send them the schedule and say, we'd like to fit you in on X date. And so, as Ed is indicating, pre-vet their appearance and see what their response is. So we can put them in this process, that if we want to, we can put them on the 9th with truncating some of that callback issue. But we're assuming that that the soonest they'll probably be the 9th or so.
And they're a lot of times into March with their budget submission.
So
Okay, well, so this is a terrific overview, but I want to give an opportunity for the rest of the committee to just ask some questions, and before we move into what next steps we would take in approving this. So I'll just start by saying I think it's a really nice format. I really love seeing systems being put in place. I love the idea of callbacks. It's something that this committee has asked for, solving a problem this committee has brought up in the past. So, I think that's terrific. But, I do have a couple of questions, and I first want to hear from the rest of the committee, what questions or thoughts in general that they have. Come on, nobody has any questions, concerns? See, this is the problem with me being chair. They know I'm gonna be the one who asks the questions. So they don't. All right, so I have a couple of questions. So one is,
Oh, good idea, because I'm sorry, where Ed actually had an idea that maybe you want to consider if on some of these you vote at the end of the meeting, at least in the preliminary vote, saying this is how you would vote on each department budget. Is that something that's done in the past, or?
Yeah, it depends on who's the liaison, but when I have had to, because we haven't had people in town administration, that seemed to reduce the crunch at the end of the process. And it was, after the presentation, if you feel you have enough information and you feel comfortable with the budget, you could decide to vote on those that you're comfortable with. Otherwise, you're weeks away from when you actually made or had your discussion with the departments. So that's up to the committee, but because this is an abbreviated process, if there's clear understanding from the committee, that might be something that you may want to get out of the way. Not that you can't change your vote if you get more information. It's just a way to kind of keep the process moving.
And,
Yeah,
and
that would be the caveat I would add is as long as we have an opportunity to go back if we get more information about collections or something.
yeah, I think Ed raised a good point. In other times I've worked, that when the finance committee reviews them, they would call them preliminary votes. And preliminary votes is that we approve this budget with these following sort of caveats. And then the final votes, they go back through and say, nothing's changed, or we've got the information and we're happy now the caveats lifted, those types of things. So it's a good point, because what the preliminary vote system did is they're not trying to recall what happened 5 meetings ago, things
Yeah.
like that.
And that definitely has happened to us where the memory is not as fresh. I do think that one thing that would be helpful, I did notice later on, you've got kind of the agenda approach, and obviously that doesn't include like minutes and or budget transfers or anything, but I do think it might be helpful to have some kind of, I don't know, it has to be every week, but it would be good to have an ongoing, really just high level brief update from Ed on where we are with tax collections, et cetera. It doesn't even have to be verbal if he's not available. Like, it could be written and included in our packet. But I know over the course of the development of the budget, you all are getting new numbers in, things are changing for you. Sometimes by the time we find out about it, we're really kind of far deep in the process. So if we're kind of getting information as you all are, I think it'll help us stay abreast and informed as we're making these votes.
Stephanie, we corresponded about the revenue trend. You guys get that on a monthly basis in terms of where we are with the non-tax levies. So you would like the tax levy numbers. In the past, what we've been is like 100% or above 100% in our tax collections. So we hadn't provided that type of information, but we can add that type of information to the materials you get each month.
I think that, yeah, the revenue trends tend to be really detailed. And I'm thinking more of something that's just literally like a paragraph executive summary of kind of, we're a little off on this. We're kind of worried about that. We're going to be keeping an eye on this very high level so that we're not having to go and dig for that information. That would be my preference. I don't know if the rest of the committee has any concerns about that, but.
Or is there something I can do to the revenue trending report to make that easier to understand or read?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
Because
just, it's a lot.
that is a very high level report. What we give internally is like a 20-page document with every revenue category.
All right,
And then
maybe
what
I'm
we-
thinking of that. Yeah.
And we don't normally give that to the selectmen, or the expense budget has multiple pages. The
Yeah, we
revenue
get
trend,
something that's got a lot. It's like, looks like a spreadsheet and
revenue trend is just 1 page.
what are we
Why don't
talking
get
about?
you,
I'll give you, I'll give you some samples of what we currently have, and then you guys can pick and choose.
And then what
So,
I'll do is I'll take a look at the schedule and talk to Ed about what meeting that deliverable will be provided to you. So you'll anticipate it as part of that meeting process.
all right, so question on just on the schedule. You mentioned budget books are going to be delivered to the finance committee. The date when we
On the
start actually
5th,
going
yeah.
through this? Is it possible to get it before we start meeting with department heads, or And are we going to be able to pick them up at town hall? Like they're
Well,
huge
what
books.
we'll do is we do Zoom, you're correct, budget for community services, your first clients, as it were, for the 5th. You'll get that in PDFs sent to you. But December 31st, the budget is wrapping up production of the books, and then getting them to you means that you might end up getting them just before the meeting. So we want to get you the first set of budgets the week before. So we're going to send you the community services recreation budgets by PDF, and then on the 5th, you will each have in hand your budget books delivered to the finance committee. So that will cover all the other budgets thereafter, after the 5th. I put community services there because it is less likely that group is going to take up an entire meeting. So that gives Bob and Ed and whoever else there to deliver the budget message and answer any questions. So on the 5th, it's a budget message. The books are in your hands, and community services, of which you would have received the PDFs on or about or after the 31st. Then after that, the books will guide you through the rest of the process. However, if, let's say on the 5th, you decide that, hey, I was reading about community development and planning, I need to know more about this, I'm sending those questions to them on the Monday, possibly, that you have raised between the Wednesday and the Monday. And I'm turning them around, and they're showing up prepared for the Wednesday to answer questions that may be specific. And then it just, for lack of a better phrase, rinse and repeat as you go through the process. But the groupings are different than years past. We got the big 3 right in the middle there. And you're going through some of the smaller departments right in the beginning to sort of, like a better phrase, get that momentum in the budget process without getting hit with your larger budgets.
So that's terrific that you'll have those ones for the January 5th meeting sent to us ahead of time. I'm just pointing out that logistically having them delivered to the finance committee does not exist because we're all meeting on Zoom. So we're going to have to figure out some logistics about, yeah, you pick it up, you know, that afternoon, they'll be available in town hall.
Yeah.
That sort of thing, you know.
I mean, there's 5 or members. I don't mind driving them around, and they're just gonna figure out one town, a person had a driveway that was a half mile long with a couple of gates. So there's logistics in that.
I don't know if there's anyone like
That's not
that.
my house.
That's
Yeah,
all.
it's not mine.
I can deliver
Um,
Stephanie. She's right. She lives close to me.
Yeah.
So we'll
Ed's
work
around
out
the
the
corner from me.
logistics for the delivery, but I think the commitment is that the morning of the 5th, you're gonna have the books. And December 31st is when the budget is done. So at least what we're gonna try to do is, if we look at all these groups, we try to get community services done so that we can PDF them and send them to you.
Yeah.
And then they will also be in the book, so you don't have to print them and stuff it. So it's a
Terrific.
book.
Okay, so, and again, if there's members who have questions, George, do you have a question?
Yeah, you were talking a moment ago, Stephanie, about information on revenue, and we suggested we're getting these monthly reports, but you know, the revenue side tells us everything but what the property tax revenue is. So how do we get a handle on that? Or is that,
Well, that was Stephanie's request. And in the past, that was a non-issue because we were collecting prior year's delinquents. We were at 99% or 100% for like 6 years.
okay.
So we never
all right.
put that in there because it was a non-factor. Yes, this year it's more of a factor. So yeah, we'll give that to you.
Could
The re-
that be
and-
just
and
added?
The report says non-tax levy, and that helps
Yeah, right.
us. That helps us to try to discern how much free cash we may be generating based on percentages over 100% of where we might have been in the
Sure,
previous year.
sure.
And then where we are with the budget. So we're
Right.
gonna have another strong revenue year this fiscal year. And that's why we're able to look at FY '23 and put more items back into the tax levy that we took out, looking at the worst case scenario related to COVID, which we didn't experience, and that's why we're in great financial shape. You know, relatively speaking versus previous years, previous decades.
Yeah, I think the thing is, and maybe this is something that comes from Bob or Bill, but you know, just the 1 year that I've kind of been through this process, it seems like there's generally it's just kind of par for the course to have some kind of late breaking developments as we go from, you know, January 1st through the I don't know, February 22nd or even a little bit later, not the least of which is the school piece. But I guess, you know, kind of going back to that high level, just having that 30,000 foot perspective of what's happening and kind of being able to know what's happening as it happens or shortly thereafter, as opposed to finding out like a month into the process. That's kind of the point that I was trying to make.
We put the report out 3 times a month. And what we do is we put out a preliminary report early in the month. We put it out after the first week, and then we put it out 3 weeks after. Some of the revenues, just talk about late breaking. We don't get our hotel motel tax revenue until the end of each quarter. So we don't know in an interim between those periods of time what that revenue is going to look like. So that could be something that perhaps you're referring to. The other item is the first and largest by far commitment of motor vehicle excise. That doesn't come until February. So there's no way, the largest revenue sources from the non-tax levies, we don't have that information, say on a weekly or a monthly basis. Those are on a quarterly basis, or they happen at a specific time each year. So, you know, those maybe are the surprises, and they've all been, you know, positive surprises over the course of the year, except for hotel motels, whereas though the short-term rentals were positive surprises because we never had a means to track them in the past. So, you know, those are, I think, those issues. And as you pointed out, the school budget, which is by far the largest single budget that we have to deal with. So it's not as though we're withholding information. We only get that information at certain periods of time.
No,
Make sure I understand what you're saying. The revenue comes from various sources. Those fees we collect in town, we know monthly. Those that the Department of Revenue collects for us and redistributes back to us, like various taxes, those we get on a quarterly basis. And then the RMV fee is, did you say that was annual that we are notified of?
We get what's called a commitment or a drop of files from the RMV probably once a month. But the revenues are extremely small compared to the 1 month where we're basically doing all of the renewals for the motor vehicle excise tax. So for example, if you got a new vehicle, you're going to pay the tax then. But then next year, you're going to have it all in the February or March, whenever they decide to give us that information.
Okay, all right.
So those are the three largest, or have been the 3 largest buckets. And we don't know that information really until after the first quarter and then into February or March.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I mean, not a problem, but it's the nature of the beast, you know. Dealing with macroeconomic data, you know, the Labor Department reports monthly, the Commerce Department reports quarterly, and by the time you get anything that it's really meaningful, you just got to deal with that. As long as I know what the lags are, I can at least get a sense of what's going on. That's all.
Right.
yeah, I think just looking over, you know, the November report that was sent out, you're right, it is 1 page. But, you know, aside from being able to kind of, you know, read financials, you know, for my job, I don't necessarily have the ability to kind of translate that or have kind of context around that. And so I guess I'm not asking that to necessarily on a, you know, weekly basis or anything be, have a little narrative attached to it, but I think it would be helpful. You have, this is your language, not necessarily ours. So, if there is some kind of translation and, just kind of telling us again, here's, we're doing well. These are the things, like when I have the nonprofit that I run, we have, I meet with our accountants who manage, our budget and our finances. And I meet with them on a monthly basis, and they bring to my attention and say, these are the things that are good. These are the good indicators. These are the things we have to keep an eye out on. They draw our attention to it. So that's all I'm saying, is that it would be helpful to have, town staff support in that as we are building the budget. And obviously, we have a different approach with, new leadership at town hall, which I think is terrific. But ultimately, it's our name on the budget. So I think it's just wanting to kind of be well-versed on that and not having to kind of go hunting for it and try to interpret it on our own without having a financial background. Like, that just doesn't fit for me.
Can I start with just giving you a document that, tries to help you read that document to understand it? Because it gives percentages that say we're either above what we brought in last year or below. And then it also looks all the way across what we've budgeted. So I can highlight that. I can even put red circles around that stuff. But, you want to report each. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. Ed, let's just move on. Okay, other things going into the agenda. So it basically looks like for the presentation and the questions that you've budgeted 40 minutes, Bill. And, I know that the committee members have expressed in the past that we've kind of dealt with somewhat unrealistic budgeting of time, and we've always kind of run over. I just want to make sure. So like looking at this agenda, would we consider it being like 40 minutes for all of community services, or 40 minutes for recreation and 40 minutes for golf and 40,
No,
what
I
mean?
think that you're going to, I think it says something to the effect that you're going to truncate some of the ones where you have an overall department with separate divisions. Obviously, if you took 40 minutes for DBW, you'd be there all, well, you might be like the selectmen's meeting in terms of, 11:45 and such. So, what we'll do is that's guidance if you had one department. I think what you want to do is figure out, do you have a 2-hour meeting or do you have an 1.5-hour meeting? And then I would then, as we move forward, set up specific agendas for the pending cases. So if you look up above, we might actually put times on recreation, golf, senior services, and natural resources within that agenda. But this is basically a sequence that gets you those, 45 minutes or whatever. And so you can fit in several departments. So this is an overall sequence as shown by the agenda. When you get the agendas for each week, I'm going to break down each department and say, you've got X number of minutes. So the presentation for recreation might be 15, and not 30 full minutes and things like that. But if you were to look at this, this is going to be police, then fire, that they're going to take these full amount of times individually. So you'll get more specific agendas. The advantage is knowing the sequence of departments and then knowing that we're going to allocate times. I think what you want to do as a committee, how much time do you want to spend in these meetings? Are they 2 hours? CIP committee said it's 6 to 8 or whatever it was. I think that was the typical methodology. And then we fit people in within the context of that. If you got 2 hours, then I would take, let's say, January 5th. And I would take these people and tell them you have so much time for your presentation, recreation, golf, senior services, natural resources. And then you would fit in 2 hours. So as a committee, much time do you want? And do you want some time at the end to discuss everything? I've got 15 minutes for recap. And what that means is that you're going through and saying, what would we want to, what important aspects of what we heard do we want to include in the report? And we're just taking down bullet points to be considered for the report. Action items is there. You're basically, each person is going through and saying, I want to know more about this, or I like what you're doing here, but could you consider this? And it's just a punch list for the department head to lead with. And that gets you to that sort of callback. So that action item, you're giving them a punch list to say, we need to see this, this, and this. We'll take it up at the callbacks, and report and recap is what do we want to put in the report? And that way we're sort of documenting it as we go through each time. But you're right, we're not going to do 45 minutes for each department. Once you decide how long your meetings are going to be, I would sort of take each department and then give them a time allocation to fit in that time frame.
So, and then we're also going to have to tack on to that preliminary vote at the end if we do end up deciding to do
Yeah, if you
that.
want to do the preliminary vote, yeah, you would go around, you could maybe do that in the report and recap, but you would go around and do preliminary votes. A lot of times in other budget committees I've worked with, they would go down the light items and then somebody would read them and then somebody would say check, and then they only talk about those. And what it does is if you've got a pretty straightforward budget and there's not a lot to talk about, but somebody's concerned about what they see in a particular line item and payroll or service, they just said check, and then the department goes back and you discuss that in more detail. So that's
I just
another
wanna-
methodology that moves meetings along.
I want to ask the members of the committee, particularly those who have been through several budget cycles, how do you feel about this agenda? Do you feel like it's overly optimistic? It's on point? It could be tightened up? Is it something to aim for?
I think it'll work. At least we give it a try, see what happens.
Anyone else?
I agree with Nate. I'm trying to see how this is any different than what we've done the last couple of years. So, but it's now written out as in some sort of formal plan, but I thought that's what this describes what we've been doing. So that's good in my judgment.
And that's a good point. This is somewhat from an email that Pat Armstrong sent to departments. The only difference is the action items and report and recap are added on the end. She had indicated departments be prepared to spend 30 to 45 minutes. So that's that sort of factor of multiple departments versus, one.
Yeah.
But I think you probably want to anticipate you're going to be, for fire and police, you're going to be there at least in a 2-hour meeting, those types of things.
And I
but
think
go ahead.
we've
Sorry.
generally decided as a committee, we don't want to go past 2 hours. Correct me if I'm wrong,
Right.
folks.
So
Anyone has
I'm going to
to-
try to take a look at each one of these evenings, like community services can't take up as much time as some of the other departments because you've got the town administrator up front in that first meeting. And I'm going to try to sort of create a sequence for each department, allocating them time, and then I'll send that out to you. So you would have recreation go through that sequence and say, maybe their presentation is 15 minutes instead of 30, so on and so forth. And
So
then
Bill,
you'll
you'll send,
find out- Go ahead.
sorry, I was just
You'll
gonna say,
find out
so
how much-
you'll send that to us, and then will you also, once we have that time frame set up, also, I'll reiterate it at the top of the meeting when we're doing the introductions, how much time they have, but will you send them ahead of time, how much time they have?
Yeah, no, what I'm gonna do is take this schedule and I'm gonna break it down for every single evening in terms of that sequence, so it might be a table showing that, and then try to figure out how I fit all this into 2 hours, and whether or not the first meeting, that budget message is a 20-minute discussion. The budget books explained is 10 minutes, and community services by virtue of that has less, and then you're into 2 hours. So basically, let's say I take recreation, how would I allocate their time over this? And I might spend 15 minutes at the presentation and 5 minutes in questions. And then if you like what you see, then I send it to departments to say, you have this. I mean, police and fire obviously is going to have the full complement of the what's on this agenda in terms of 30 minutes, 10 minutes, 5, 15, things like that. So I'll break it down so each department has a time allocation. If it looks good to the committee, then I'm going to send them out to the department before they show up and say, they all have pretty much the same slides. So it's not a function of what I've experienced before. One department coming in with 30 and another one coming in with 3.
So, okay, so that answers that question. Next question is so I still think, like, we communicated offline, but I do think it would make sense for you and I to check in
Sure.
prior to that agenda going out. And the other thing I'm wondering is, when you're sending out that packet of everything relative to the departments who are coming in, can we also make sure that minutes, transfers, and any other documents, so it's just one complete packet, is going out to the committee at the same time? We're not getting it in dribs and drabs?
Except for the first meeting where community services will precede the books, you'll have the books for everything. And then if you ask questions, I'm going to have them show up with, have sent the material and then show up with the answers. So yes, well, this agenda is an agenda within an agenda, in the sense that you're going to have the typical agenda, minutes and all those things. And then you'll have a block that says recreation and then how many minutes they're going to have, and senior services and everything else. So on your agenda, you'll have the departments listed, but your agenda as you have it for today, your agenda as you have it for today, we would use the same format, such as this one. I think you see it: open meeting, roll call, approval of minutes. If we have budget transfers, we do that. And then we would have a block in the middle, budget reviews. And then you go back. So you'll still have a normal agenda sent to you.
Right. And I think that's a terrific approach. And I think it'll make it really, it'll make it easier for town staff, and hopefully will create some ease and predictability there. My question is, will any other attachments, such as the presentations that come from the department that are delivered the Wednesday before, the minutes or budget transfers, can we have them all sent at the same time to the
Oh
committee?
yeah, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great.
Whether or not the presentations will show up the week before, I'm offering that, but I'm not quite sure if I can guarantee that, because presentations are often something that I know myself, I usually do them at the last minute after I've written everything that goes into the memo. So we'll try to get you the presentations ahead of time. But if you see things that are questions and things like that, at least they'll show up with that additional material. You'll get material as we go through the budget process. If there's changes that come down from Ed's office to the town administrator or the department, you'll get that sent with your agenda and the minutes and everything else that's on the agenda in one email.
So that's all the questions that I have at this point. I would say I'm very comfortable with moving forward with this approach. The only adjustments that I would offer are, as previously stated. And I think the other thing is too, as we are kind of writing this report, that, it's terrific to have you do the lion's share of it, but, again, if it's coming from the committee, there should be at least some committee liaising on writing it, particularly as it comes to what the voters see in the warrant. So, working with the chair is how I would kind of describe that as the process that makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, I think the report approach, the process, I can take care of that, as I said. I might, if there's narrative from the departments that provide a good lead or an introduction, we might put that together in the report just as a, here's what their issues are. And then the comments are from the finance committee and the recommendations are from the finance committee. So some of the stuff that's filler, like the process, the 1 page,
Sure.
things like that, I can do that as we're moving through the process.
That makes sense. I just think anything that goes out with the finance committee's name on it needs to have been reviewed by
No, you're right.
either the finance committee leadership or by the full committee. All right, any last thoughts as we wrap up budget process?
Can I just raise a question, Stephanie?
Sure, George.
Clarifying, I'm not sure what, I'm losing names here. It's a sign of my age. The finance director.
Ed.
What Ed said was
you.
he was able to provide us with some indication of the levy portions of the revenue, or we don't need that because it's already at
I am gonna-
100%.
I am going to provide it.
Oh, okay, that's all I wanted to know. And I'm not looking for anything more than a report that exists.
Well, we don't have one. It's in our accounting system.
Okay, and that
it's-
can be just, okay, as long as it's not trying to create the wheel here, you're gonna have to do every day.
It's
but,
probably
it
something
would be
that's
useful
needed this
information.
year where it was never needed before. So
Okay.
I'll look at, trying to simplify it for people.
Okay,
and
good, thank you.
Possibly utilizing a similar formats to what we've had in the past. And this would be for real estate and personal property. Those are
Right.
the tax levy items.
Right.
The other ones like motor vehicle excise, the local receipts
Yep,
from the
understand.
DOR and others, those are already in your other reports.
Yep, yep,
This would be the missing piece. I mean, if you want to see ambulance receipts and you want to see, other ones, we have other available funds too for, the things such as ferry fees and all of those others. So, we can give you as, all of the different revenues that we have that aren't necessarily considered something that generates free cash. So, but if it's all the revenue sources or just personal property and real estate, that would simplify it a bit.
And Ed, when they develop the budget package, does it include the revenues generated by the department in terms of that goes to in the book?
Yes.
Yeah, so,
Well, mostly for the enterprise funds,
right,
the self-sufficient, because most of them are all tax supported.
right. But the ambulance fees will be in the fire department budget.
Not
Always-
usually,
Okay,
unless somebody wants it, but that is reported out because that's another available fund.
right.
So we generate that report along with the local receipts. So that's already in a report that currently exists.
What I think we'll do is that, take a look at some of the products that are available and then, send out some samples and see where we can go from there.
The other piece would just be logistical. We've got some serious needs in terms of these transfers. And we're going to be putting in e-signatures from DocuSign so that you guys can just sign them electronically and not have to do them with wet signatures. But in the meantime, we do have to have these documents signed. I can ferry them to a particular location or they'll be here at Town Hall, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, I can swing by town hall, I think
Okay.
this
Then
week.
Mary Alice will have them in pen.
So what we'll do is on the agenda, basically always list an item called transfers and other authorizations, and then if there's something, we'll list what they are below that agenda item. So it's always there. If there's nothing to do, there won't be anything below that agenda.
Perfect. I think that'll create some great predictability for Mary Alice too. And yeah, I agree with George, nobody likes to have work created for them. And I certainly don't think that that's the intention of this committee. But again, even just a couple of lines verbally or written, just kind of, hey, this is where we are. I think that it would be helpful as we're shaping this. All right. The next item we have on the agenda, unless there's any other comments. Next item we have on our agenda is the budget interview questions. My understanding from you, Bill, is that you
Some of that,
still want to go over that.
If I may, some of that is going, if the Finance Committee wants to take a look at the, what is it, the presentation format and the submittal and the deliverable format, then I will send out to you some questions. But the format in itself begs some of the questions that I already was raising, like what has changed in your budget? If we go to that deliverable, and I lost it in my attachments. But the memo that you have in the presentation in the back, there are things like challenges facing your department division, recommendations to consider for addressing future challenges, changes in your budget, salary, staffing, expenses. So those are pretty much the questions that I was going to ask. So when I saw this presentation, it was in an email from both the town administrator and then Pat Armstrong, it sort of met that. So if we want to add something, we would probably say, can you add this additional slide to your budget presentation template? And then do it that way, that they would be pre-vetted for the question. The advantage that Jeff Colby told me is he's going to take his budget presentation template from last year, update the numbers, and it's going to make it a really smooth process to go to the Finance Committee, board, and other venues with the same type of product. So I think if we do have additional questions beyond what they're presenting in their presentations, we might want to have them include that in an additional slide. But pretty much the questions that I was recommending you ask were commensurate with what the presentation is. So provide your mission statement, recap key points, highlights of the past year. And I think that goes to Mr. Perkins in terms of how did the sort of pandemic, I think it was mentioned in an earlier meeting, affect your organization. Budget overview, the 3 fiscal years, changes your budget, salary, staffing, expenses, challenges your department face, recommendations for those challenges, and then questions. So if we think we need additional items, I can ask the departments to add one more slide to cover those. And if we want to specifically get to sort of those pandemic issues, we can ask them to sort of approach it from that perspective. But after that presentation guide in the memo, the template, there is a handout, which is template guidelines, which is the interpretation of what they're supposed to provide for each slide. So I think the questions are covered, but if we're missing something, we'll have them added in an additional slide in the presentation. So it's less about what you're asking them, and you're asking them in advance to provide it to you.
Mm-hmm. I thought we covered this last week and provided some feedback on the questions, but maybe we could just go over again. Asking the committee, are there specific questions that you'd like included in this budget presentation that everyone answers generically across departments?
While you were talking, I had one thought, and I don't know that I want to ask this of everybody, but I've heard several times in this year's process and in previous years' processes that we have been level funded for an awful lot of years. And so I might wonder what they would do if they were given the opportunity to spend 10% more, or I don't know what the number is. But if we, had some ability to spend more, what would they spend it on? But maybe that, some of these other questions get at that. I fear it's-
If I may, Madam Chair, that there was a question in another finance committee that I work with that asked a similar question. If you were given additional revenue, what would be your top priority to expand or refund? And then, I mean, it doesn't necessarily go to the 10%. I mean, they could come in and say, well, if you give me 5 million, I could do this, but it's a question on what priority would they bring back?
Mhm. And
I mean,
it
if
makes them
that's,
choose
what
one.
you're looking at, Mr. Perkins, then maybe that's something that they want to provide. And and Ed is pointed out in the presentation, recommendations to consider for addressing future challenges. We could probably add the statement, tell us what your priorities for expansion or refunding are in that question also. Because that's a good point. If we see sort of opportunities, you're not able to know what they want to bring back unless they tell you in terms of revenue opportunities.
George, is that satisfactory to you? Or
No, that sounds great. In some sense, I would assume that they're
Thanks, sir.
doing that in their own budget process, but it would help, I think, me to hear them reflect on that question. So that'd be, I don't know how much time we have. I'm not trying to add more to it, but I think that would be helpful.
I can
That man-
maybe expand on the budget process. Bob Rittenhour is in the process of meeting with each one of the departments. We had our meeting with him today. That's why I'm in today. And part of that process was what are your challenges? What additional resources do you need for this particular budget cycle? And what he's trying to do is look at it versus the tax levy proposition 2.5 to see what would fit, what might go into free cash. So that process is, as you're indicating, is undergone now, and those are all in the budget submissions from the departments. It wasn't, oh, if you had X amount of additional cash, what would you do with it? But it's, what are your needs? What do we need to think about addressing? And then he's going to try to prioritize it and see what will fit within the budget parameters. And those budget parameters were outlined by the selectmen, which is to stay within the limits of Proposition 2.5.
Okay. Other questions from the committee that you'd like to see included in the presentations? One of the things I had mentioned last week is I've noticed that when it comes to that slide about challenges facing the department, occasionally we tend to kind of talk about things that really there's no fiscal impact, and there's really not anything that we as the finance committee can do or advocate for. So, kind of tightening that up a little bit and doesn't even necessarily have to be in the slides, but just sort of it was verbally conveyed to the department heads of what are the challenges facing your department as it relates to the budget. So for example, if we were talking earlier, if you're having staffing problems and that is relating to, the housing challenges here on Cape Cod, the fact that we don't, in this particular town, pay competitive wages, and that is impacting, your ability to kind of provide the services that you need, that clearly has a fiscal impact. So you can weave whatever the problem is into a kind of a fiscal framework. But I think, again, to make sure that the time that we have, which is so limited, is used and to really give us the fiscal picture, that I would suggest that.
So in terms of, I've got the two are you seeing the two slides I have up? I think yeah,
Yep.
so I have those two. What would we want to add to, let's say, the top one in terms of a question?
I would just say challenges facing your department or division as it relates to financial challenges.
All right. I know that,
Or as it
every-
relates to your budget.
okay,
Should we?
I know that when I've run building offices in the past, I never have enough inspectors, but I always make a ton of revenue and I never get it back. So my budget message always was, I want some of my permit fees back. So the reality is, and all finance directors say, no, you're not going to get it. But in that regard, usually I think what we might want to see is, do you have people to deliver those sort of in the street services, and what are the issues there? Because building inspection, health inspection, and all those things are ongoing issues. So I'll try to figure out a question for that, or more sort of specificity for that, and then get it to you in terms of the challenges, so we elicit more of those issues.
Yeah,
What
I don't
like
want to,
is-
I don't want to stifle, if there are relevant things for the
Yeah.
committee to hear, I don't want to stifle that. I'm just trying to kind of hone it in a direction that it gives us more of a fiscal perspective, because that's our purview.
All right.
George, do you want to say something?
I was just gonna say, maybe it'd be helpful to break it down into staffing problems and other expenses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually think that would be really interesting to hear about, because the concern that I have Cape-wide, but particularly for this town that we live in here, is, we're hearing about these ongoing housing costs and how that's impacting municipalities. So for example, on the Outer Cape, they are having to offer $10,000 or $20,000 stipends to attract a town administrator or an assistant town administrator or a fire chief, or even now that's starting to impact, what they have to pay to attract just rank and file firefighters, for example. And I think for us, and again, for the general public, it would be really helpful to see how that trend is developing. I fully expect that it's going to get worse, but we need to know about it, and we need to hear about it from department heads of like, geez, this is a lot worse than last year. This is what we might have to pay. This is what this is going to mean in terms of cuts and services. Like, I think framing it that way of staffing and challenges that relate to the budget are two kind of subsets of that question that would be really interesting to hear.
Okay.
And then if you look at
It
this,
wouldn't be a bad idea that we would send that question out, those types of questions out to everybody as a group of pre-vetted questions, that is obtaining staff or recruiting staff a difficult challenge, and how does it relate from a budgetary perspective and a service perspective?
and what are the factors that are going into that, right? Like, we know anecdotally it's housing, it's, lack of competitive pay, it's, other factors, but we need to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Right.
So I think, yeah, having that would be super helpful. And then the secondary kind of question that you have there about recommendations to consider for addressing future challenges. So either there or on the previous page where you have, or the first page where you've got recap of key points, highlights from the past year. I do think that either there or on this recommendations, we should say lessons learned. So it doesn't have to be lessons learned of the pandemic, it'd be lessons learned. But George asked that question as it relates to this year. I think we should be asking that every year. What are the lessons learned out of these challenges that you faced? And then when we're looking at recommendations, the other thing that I want to know is, what have you done to address that before you're coming to us? So have you, pursued grants? What are kind of the actions that have been taken? Has the town tried to get an earmark, et cetera? Just giving us a perspective of, which is something that I think that, Bob alluded to last week is you want to make sure, certainly on the capital side, but I think it relates to the overall budget, that if department heads are coming in looking for additional funding for something or other, that we want to have explored all of our options, before we go to the tax levy. So I think that's a question that would help us get at that.
Yeah, and sort of capital budget committee had a slide there that basically said use somebody else's money, and that what they're going to do is they're going to ask department heads to come in and go over where they've attempted to get other funds. So, there's some potential that recreation could be going to CPA before they come into us and see if their proposal fits. So I think that recommendations to consider addressing those future challenges, maybe a bullet point. Have you looked at other funding sources, and things like that we could list in there. I'm not quite sure if it is in the description. Difficulty, yeah. So if you look at slide 5, challenges facing a department, difficulty retaining expense accounts need to be updated. Capital budget versus budget. I think we could also put to that issue, what have you done to look for other funding sources or other means to offset your demand or request?
Yeah, and I also think, though, like, I can hear some people's voices in my heads of the department heads, when they're talking about the challenges. And I think if we don't explicitly ask the question about what's going into those recruitment, retention, what are the factors leading to those problems, and if we're not asking, and what are you attempting to do about it, that we can't assume that they're going to talk about it. We have to be explicit in asking it, either, in that document or in the presentation slides. And it's something that I think would be relevant to hear across all departments.
Okay, and that's not a bad point, because that the answer has become an overall sort of statement as part of the budget message.
Yes. Yeah, because
If
that
you
can give
see a
us a bigger
consistent
picture
pattern.
view for the voters.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think this is a terrific approach to this fiscal year. Does anyone else have any other questions? Covered a lot this evening. Just as you mentioned the budget message from the town administrator on the January 5th meeting, since
Yep.
that is going to be our next meeting, could you just give us a little bit of preview? Are you talking about the budget message that's in this document that we've seen a couple times?
Some of it
or
may
just-
be in what you've, some of it may be in
That-
what you received, the selectmen's policy statement. But I think what Bob wants to do is, given he will have sat down with everybody, he might want to sit down and talk to you about some of the consistent patterns he's seeing and the observations before you start your process, so that you're not going through all over again what he's already gone through. So, I mean, there's some opportunities there that he can deliver what, and as Ed said earlier, there are questions he's asking that he may be able to sort of give a message to in that first meeting. So Bob wanted to make sure that he was sort of the first one in to be able to relate some of his experiences through the budget review process and sort of a message on this is the direction we might want to consider. And then you're vetting some of your information with that knowledge.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear what he has to say as a fresh set of eyes. So I think that'll be really interesting. The last item on our agenda is communication with appointing authority regarding member temporary leave of absence. That's of course regarding our friend and chair, Brian. And this is basically because, we had generally agreed at our meeting before town meeting that we wanted to keep the seat for available for Brian when he comes back from his medical leave. And so just making sure that the appointing authority is aware of that, just kind of formalizing that communication that's been done already verbally. And then but now we have the news that Sarah is actually permanently leaving us. So I think we would have to communicate that as well. Bill, I don't know if you've already taken a stab at a draft letter, or if you want to work with me offline to get that taken care of.
I can get you a draft within the context of the charter and the bylaws and indicate to the board or maybe the town administrator to process. I think you should cover both issues, which is one, you have this issue where a member wants to stay and they're almost have a leave of absence in that regard. And then you are also asking, we need one more member. Could you go through the process for that? So we can do both in the same correspondence.
What are the committee's thoughts on this?
First thing, Stephanie, you got to remember that the appointing authority is you as the acting chair, town moderator, and the chair of the Board of Selectmen. And I don't know that that you would have to have a meeting to discuss this. And you also have to call a meeting to replace Sarah if you want to fill that before the year is over. And there's also a possibility, I don't know if there's any candidates available for the committee, but there may also be another vacancy on the board shortly.
Is that a hint?
Just a thought. I'm on my 4th town administrator and my 4th or 5th assistant town administrator. I think we got to look at why we're replacing all these people so often. And well, it's just a thought.
Okay. Well, it's good to know, Jack. Would certainly hate to lose anyone else. I guess the other question that I just have for the committee is, does it make sense to try to replace Sarah right now as we're getting into this budget process? I mean, if we didn't, we'd have to make sure every single one of us attended, so we had a quorum.
Is there
No, I guess we
anybody
could have one
available?
person. We could have one person be absent, but no, we couldn't.
Is there anybody even available that wants to run? I mean, if there's nobody that's put their name forward, there's no way you can replace them anyway.
We just heard about the other member leaving today by email. So I think we'll try to get the word out as soon as we can in that regard, if you want to move forward.
Okay. Do we need to vote on this item, Bill?
What I'll do is get you the communication and then we will start vetting. I mean, you have a member to replace you regardless of your budget process. And we'll start vetting that. And then, so by the time your meeting comes up on the 5th, you'll have a letter to send to deal with Brian's leave of absence, and also sort of a reminder to something that we'll have ongoing anyway, which is we have this resignation. And then it's better you write that to Bob. Bob assigns it to me. I go chase it down and get the group together to go through the appointment process and write a letter from them back to you saying we accept the leave of absence under this statute or charter. And then we'll see what we can do about members. I mean, if there's members on other boards or committees that have served on the finance committee, that's the first place we want to start is, sort of somebody that would return to this for one cycle at least.
I do think we need to be thinking about this from the lens of, it is unfortunate to lose another, the only other younger woman on this committee. I do think that, whatever we can do to kind of solicit applications from women, certainly from people of color. We don't have anyone of color on this committee. I think that is certainly, and if we can be a little bit proactive in doing that, I think that it would really help give us a different lens when it comes to a lot of these conversations.
Do you have
mean-
anybody who would step forward, Stephanie?
I have a couple people I might be able to ping. And I have a couple other people that I could ask who might know people. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't know a person, I'm kind of up there in age and everything else. So, you're out there more and about, and a lot of us certainly are.
Not as out and about as I used to be 18 months ago.
Stephanie, I certainly agree with the diversity issues that you mentioned, and but the question was, do we move to a point now or wait till the end of the current budget process? And in response to that question, I would be in favor of appointing now. I just think any experience is good. The second thing is, I think we need to get some clarity about the position that, God, I'm having a hard time with names, I'm giving away my age here. But with our chair, our actual chairman's or suspended chairman, whatever you want to call it here, with his leave of absence, Brian.
Brian.
But I think that affects our quorum numbers. So we need to get that clarified. How
Yeah.
many active members do we have? And we've got to get, so we don't get back into this nonsense about do we or do we not have a quorum? So that should be done very quickly, it seems to me. And I think bringing someone else on in order to just get them up to speed. There's nothing better than going through the process to learning what it's about.
Go through the deep end.
And finally, I think making the committee more diverse should be a high priority. So I don't know how we do that. And like Nate, I just know old guys that play golf. So that's probably not a good pool to draw from.
Okay. Well, I think we did get some more clarity relative to the quorum issue, but that is a good nuance to it, Bill, that maybe you could just check in on as it relates to someone temporarily on leave and or someone who's resigned, how that affects the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I saw your response to that question of, what the quorum number is, depending upon the number of appointed individuals. But now we need to clarify who's on the committee for purposes of determining that. My comments the other night were to the extent that that was resolved by town council, because, I'm fully aware of what that was about, because it was about me. I was the one who was being put on the committee, and the concern had been raised that we would be having a potential for an even number of members. But that was resolved by town council at the time. So if that wasn't put into the bylaw, which we voted on at town meeting, then I was sort of surprised that we didn't have an answer to that. But I'm glad it's been clarified, whether it's by opinion of town council or because it's in the bylaws. Is irrelevant. But I think we want to make sure that we don't confront that ambiguity again, because somebody asked the question, well, what about Brian? Isn't he on it? Or then we're forced to have 5.
So Bill, will you be able to get back to us on the 5th with that or before?
Yeah, so what we'll do is in structuring the letter, we'll be able to answer that, but it's a good point to the extent that if he's on a leave of absence, he's still a member unless he resigns. So the question is it a function of he's on a leave of absence and no longer a member and thereby he's resigning with a commitment by the appointing authority to, when he wishes to return, to reappoint him, you know? So there's a whole bunch of options we can do, but if there is no sort of bullpen for this, there's no alternate member. So as a result, unless he resigns, he's still a member, which means if you have 7 members and one just resigned today and he's not available, then you're down to 5. And with a quorum of, 4 still for the 7. So my understanding is you either have 7 or 9, and the quorum for 7 is 4, the quorum for 9 is 5. So you'd still have, you'd have 1 member unavailable, 1 member that would be, have resigned. So you are still a body of 7, which requires 4, but you only really have 5 available. So 1 person, 2 people don't show up, you don't have a quorum.
Yeah, there might be
So I'll-
a nuance with someone who resigned because they're not technically appointed at that point, are they? But we can talk about this offline. I actually just realized it's past 8 o'clock and we did say we want to really limit these meetings to 2 hours.
Yeah,
I would move. we
so
adjourn.
I'll go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Well, Jack was moving to adjourn.
Okay, go ahead. I don't know. This is my 3rd and 4th meeting this week, so please proceed.
Well, you and I can talk offline.
Yes,
and we can-
I'll
we can
do that.
Figure out the logistics of
I'll
it,
check out the
but
laws and just email you what I think the approach could be.
yeah, I appreciate it and hope you get some rest. All right.
Yeah.
Jack, you want to make that motion?
I've made it.
Second,
Okay, I'll do a roll call. Robert has left. So George,
aye.
Nate,
Aye.
Jack,
Aye.
and I am also an I. Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great evening and a happy holiday to everyone.
Same to you.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thanks, everybody.
Same to everybody.